They told everyone I ruined their lives. But I was the one who folded their laundry, in silence, for 6 years. I didn't shout back. I didn't beg. I packed a single bag and walked out into the cold with no one asking where I'd go. That was the moment I stopped being their scapegoat, and started being myself. Marla's voice rang out from the kitchen, sharp and echoing like a dropped glass. "You've destroyed everything." I was in the hallway, still holding Darren's old flannel shirt, warm from the dryer, folded like muscle memory. The shirt slipped from my hands when I heard her next words. "Get out, Eleanor. Now." I stepped forward and saw them, Marla, red-faced, waving a stack of papers, her sister Piper leaning against the counter like she owned it, Ivy, their daughter, perched on the stairs with her arms crossed, and my son Darren, standing behind them all, eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't speak. No one did. I asked quietly, "What happened?" My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. Marla shoved the papers toward me, crinkled and marked up with yellow highlighter. "You opened your mouth. That's what happened." I looked at her, confused. "I haven't talked to anyone about you. I don't even leave the house." "You didn't need to," Piper cut in, her tone dripping with triumph. "A phone call's all it took." Ivy scoffed from the stairs. "Classic. You act like you're helping, then make everything worse." I turned to Darren. He finally raised his eyes, but only halfway. "Did you say something to someone?" he asked, like he didn't already know the answer. "I got a call from the clinic," I said slowly. "A routine one. Insurance updates, income verification, the usual. I told them you sometimes take small handyman jobs, just to help cover things." Marla's hand flew to her forehead like I'd confessed to murder. "He's on disability, Eleanor. He's not allowed to have side jobs." "I didn't know that," I said, heart sinking. It wasn't an accusation. It was small talk. "You don't get to decide what's harmless," Piper sneered. "Not when it's someone else's life on the line." I stood frozen, the walls pressing in like a shrinking box. Ivy grabbed a slipper off the steps and hurled it toward me. It thudded against the wall inches from my shoulder. "Get out," she shouted. "You've ruined our family." No one told her to stop. Marla folded her arms. "You're not staying in this house another night." It was so quiet after that, I could hear the refrigerator humming behind them. I turned slowly and walked down the hallway, past the room they called mine, a guest room with no closet, where I kept my things in plastic bins under the bed. I took one small suitcase from the corner, the kind you don't need to unzip unless you're leaving for good. I packed neatly. A coat. My blood pressure pills. A pair of shoes. The photo of my mother folded inside a paperback. Everything else, I left. I didn't want them touching anything I'd touch again. From the hallway, I could hear muffled voices, celebrating, strategizing, blaming. No one checked on me. No one asked where I'd go. When I stepped back into the living room, Piper glanced up from her phone and smirked. "Took you long enough." I passed her without a word. Ivy didn't look at me. Marla stood near the door, arms crossed like a sentry. Darren was near the stairs, staring at the floor again. I paused for half a second. "Darren," I said. He didn't even blink. So I opened the door. The cold air wrapped around me like a judgment. I stepped out into it, one bag over my shoulder, my coat barely zipped, the sky a dull gray. Behind me, the door clicked shut. No slam. No screaming. Just the final hush of someone being erased. And that's how I left, without a destination, without a witness, and without the one thing I thought I'd earned after raising a son alone, a place in my own family. The house had always been quiet. Not peaceful, quiet, like something was being withheld. A silence you had to work for, like an agreement that no one ever signed but everyone obeyed. I'd been living there nearly 6 years when it happened. 6 years of keeping my footsteps light, my voice lower, my opinions folded up like laundry I never stopped doing. No one ever said you don't belong here. They didn't need to. It was understood. Every morning, I'd wake before anyone else. Not because they asked. Habit, mostly. The rhythm of an old nurse's body clock that never quite forgot the hospital. By 6 a.m., the coffee was brewed, the dishwasher emptied, towels folded into perfect thirds. That mattered to Marla. She liked a smooth linen drawer. I never asked why. Most mornings, Jamie, my 17-year-old grandson, would pass through the kitchen on his way to the bus stop. He'd nod, maybe mumble a mornin', but never stop walking. Ivy didn't come down until nearly noon, always yawning, always scrolling. Her makeup half done, her eyes already rolling. I used to think teenagers were just like that. I was wrong. Marla arrived mid-morning like a performer taking the stage, silk robe, high brows, phone in hand. Her energy filled every room before she even said a word. She never shouted, not until the end. Her power was cooler, more surgical. "Mom," she'd sigh when she saw me cleaning the stove. "You don't need to do that. We have wipes for a reason." But if I didn't, she'd wipe it herself 2 minutes later, shaking her head. Piper came and went as she pleased. Darren insisted she wasn't living with us, just visiting. But she had her own mug in the cabinet, her slippers by the back door, and a set of keys she never asked for. I once found my winter coat crumpled in a laundry basket, and when I asked about it, Piper said, "Oh, was that yours?" I laughed. She didn't. She treated the house like a hotel and me like the unpaid concierge. And no one corrected her. Not Darren, not Marla, not even Jamie. That was the hardest part, I think. Not the disrespect. You can expect that from people who don't love you. What cut deeper was the effort I made to stay small, unnoticed, and still somehow being too much. My room was a corner space behind the laundry machines, technically meant for storage. There was no window, just a dusty vent that rattled at night. I had one drawer in the dresser, shared closet space with Ivy's off-season wardrobe, and a lamp that flickered when the dryer ran. I didn't complain. I told myself, they let me stay here. That's enough. But enough for who? Every so often, I'd try to offer something, a cooked meal, a ride to the pharmacy, a birthday card with a handwritten note. Sometimes they accepted. Mostly, they didn't. Once, I baked Jamie's favorite, blueberry muffins. Left them on the counter with a sticky note, fresh. Still warm. He never touched them. I found them 2 days later, hard as rocks, tossed in the trash behind a box of takeout. I told myself teenagers forget. But he never forgot when Piper brought fast food. The thing was, I didn't resent Jamie. He was a quiet boy, always had been. Observant. Careful. He stayed out of the drama. But staying out is not the same as standing up. I think he saw more than he said. One morning, I found Piper at the kitchen table, wearing Marla's robe, legs propped on the second chair, sipping coffee from my mug, the one with the faded bluebirds I'd brought from my old apartment. "Morning, Eleanor," she chirped, like she was doing me a favor by using my name. I hesitated. "I think you have my cup." She blinked slowly, then smiled. "Do I?" And that was the end of it. I poured my coffee into a plastic measuring cup and drank it standing by the sink. Sometimes I'd hear them whispering. Not full sentences. Just fragments that floated through walls. "She's still here?" "Just until she finds a place." "How long's that gonna take?" I didn't react. I just kept wiping counters and folding towels and pretending I was lucky. Until the day luck ran out. But that part hadn't come yet. Not then. Back then, I still thought invisibility was a kind of safety. I hadn't learned yet that silence was just permission disguised as patience. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of day so uneventful, it disappears unless something unforgettable slices through the middle of it. I had just finished wiping down the stovetop when my phone rang, landline, not cell. Only clinics and telemarketers used that number. I answered on the second ring. Mrs. Hartwell? A young voice asked. This is Nora from Briar Health. Just a quick update call regarding your check-in last week. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Of course. She ran through the usual: address, emergency contact, allergies. I confirmed them all, half listening. I had a sponge in one hand, soap still clinging to my fingers. Then she asked casually, and to verify household composition, do you still live with your son? Yes, I replied. Darren and his wife. 2 grandkids. And sometimes her sister's around. Got it, she said. And who in the household contributes to the monthly income? I hesitated, but only for a second. My son receives disability, I said. But he also does small repair jobs for neighbors, nothing major, just under-the-table stuff to help out. She checked something off, then moved on. Anyone else work? I said no, finished the call, and hung up without thinking twice. It wasn't a confession. It was conversation. Background noise. Something you say when you've got one hand on a sponge and the other on autopilot. I turned back to the counter and jumped. Piper was there. I hadn't even heard her walk in. She was perched on a stool, sipping from a protein shake like she'd been there the whole time. Wow, she said lightly. That sounded intense. I blinked. It was just the clinic. Routine stuff. She tilted her head. They ask weird questions, don't they? I shrugged. Just the usual. Who lives where, who pays for what? Her smile tightened. Hope you didn't say anything they can twist. Government's funny like that. Something in her tone made my stomach knot. But she stood up, stretched, and wandered off before I could respond, barefoot, with Darren's old college sweatshirt tied around her waist like she belonged in that house more than I did. I turned back to the sink and tried to shake the feeling off. I couldn't. The next morning, a thick white envelope arrived. Darren opened it at the table, barely reacted, just scanned it, folded it back up, and slid it under a placemat. I caught a glimpse of the logo, Department of Assistance and Verification. He didn't say a word. But Marla did. That night, she cornered me in the kitchen as I was rinsing out my mug. Did you say anything about Darren working? Her voice was calm, too calm. I froze. I just mentioned he does occasional jobs. I didn't think it was a problem. Her jaw clenched. He's not allowed to have side income on disability, Eleanor. Not even casual work. I didn't know, I said, too softly. It wasn't meant to cause trouble. It was just small talk. Piper walked in, drying her nails with a dish towel she hadn't touched before. Oops, she said with a smirk. Guess the system doesn't like small talk. I looked at Darren, who was sitting at the table, unmoving. He didn't look at me. Not once. That was when the shift began, not loud, not explosive. Just a crack in the wall, quiet and deliberate. For the first time in weeks, they didn't ignore me when I entered the room. They stared. Not with curiosity. Not with love. With calculation. As if they were measuring how long it would take to erase me completely. Within 48 hours, the house changed. Not physically, same peeling paint in the hallway, same fridge magnets with expired coupons. But the air was different. Denser. Like someone had opened a window in winter and left it wide without warning. No one yelled. No one needed to. The silence did the talking. That Thursday morning, I came into the kitchen to make tea. Marla was already there, phone pressed to her ear, pacing back and forth like she was walking lines into the tile. Her voice was clipped, sharp as a staple. Yes, I'm aware. No, we were never notified. That's the issue, nothing was disclosed. But you've frozen all payments? She paused, turned slightly, and saw me by the kettle. Didn't wave. Didn't nod. Just kept talking. Back pay? What do you mean back pay? He's on disability, yes, but we didn't. She stepped into the dining room, her voice dropping. I stood there, holding the mug, heart ticking louder than the clock above the sink. Later that day, I tried asking Darren if he'd like dinner, just a simple question. He didn't answer. He was seated on the couch, arms crossed, eyes glazed over. The TV was playing one of those survival shows, but he wasn't watching. Darren? I asked again, softer. He exhaled through his nose. That was the only response. That night, no one said goodnight. Not even Jamie. I could feel it starting, the quiet unraveling. It wasn't anger. Not really. It was something colder. Strategic. Like they'd all met in a room without me and decided, let her feel it. Let her understand she's the problem. The next morning, Piper showed up at 8 a.m., holding an iced latte and talking louder than usual. She strutted in like she'd won a prize. Morning, housemates, she called. Gorgeous day to avoid federal investigations, huh? Marla didn't laugh, but she didn't stop her either. Jamie sat at the counter scrolling his phone, earbuds in. He didn't glance up when I entered. I reached for my tea tin, and Piper leaned over, voice syrupy sweet. Still making tea like nothing happened, huh? I didn't answer. She grinned. Denial's a hell of a drug. I poured the water anyway, hands steady but heart rattling. That weekend, the tension turned theatrical. Simone, their friend from across town, showed up with wine and gossip and an energy like a sitcom character no one invited. They put music on. Not loud, just loud enough to carry through walls. I stayed in my room. Until I heard my name. It started with a laugh. Then Ivy's voice, high and mocking. Let me do the impression. I just said he fixed a few sinks. I didn't know it was illegal. Roaring laughter followed. Then Piper chimed in. Don't forget the part where she clutches her pearls, I was just being helpful. More laughter. Then someone, probably Simone. We should give her a plaque, resident saboteur, still making tea in her sleep. I stared at the vent above my bed, the one that whined at night, and imagined it collapsing inward, burying me in cheap drywall and insulation. Because that would have hurt less than this. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just lay there, motionless, in a house I helped fund 6 years ago when Darren's back injury meant they were drowning in medical bills and overdue rent. They didn't want me gone. Not exactly. They wanted me humiliated enough to leave on my own. The next day, no one acknowledged the girls' night. But everything had shifted. At breakfast, Ivy wore sunglasses and Marla smelled like perfume and hangover. Piper was already in my seat at the table, legs crossed, smiling like she'd earned it. I stood there for a second, holding my mug. No one looked up. So I walked back down the hallway, past Jamie's door, past the guest bathroom, past the dryer with the dent in the side, put the mug on my nightstand, sat on the edge of the bed, and told myself what I'd been avoiding for months. They don't love you. They tolerate you when it's convenient. And now that you're inconvenient, they're showing you the door, without ever having to say it out loud. The night I left, no one noticed I was already gone. There wasn't a final fight. No slammed doors. No shouting match in the kitchen. It was worse than that. It was silence, coordinated, complete. Marla had made lemon chicken. It used to be my favorite. She didn't ask if I wanted a plate. Didn't glance my way when she announced dinner. Ivy passed me in the hallway without a word, earbuds in, chewing gum like she was trying to drown out the sound of my breathing. Jamie was on the couch, hoodie pulled over his head, phone screen casting blue light across his face. He didn't look up. Piper was already in my chair at the table, one leg crossed, wine glass in hand, laughing at something on her phone. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Long enough for someone to see me. No one did. So I turned around. Back down the hallway. Back into the storage room they let me sleep in. I closed the door gently and sat on the edge of the cot. The smell of laundry detergent hung in the air, faint, sharp, artificial. Someone had tossed a pile of wet towels on the floor again. I stared at the bare wall across from me, the one with the cracked outlet and the dent from when Ivy kicked her boots off too hard. I waited. I don't know for what, maybe a knock, maybe a sliver of decency. None came. That's when I knew. They weren't going to ask me to leave. They were waiting for me to make the final move, so they could wash their hands and say, "We didn't kick her out. She just couldn't handle it." I stood slowly. My knees cracked. My hands didn't shake. I pulled out the small duffel I kept under the cot. The one I'd never unpacked all the way. I packed deliberately. 3 outfits. My pills. My address book. The small framed photo of Jamie as a baby, back when he used to call me Graham. I didn't take the sweaters Marla gave me for Christmases past. Didn't touch the blanket Ivy forgot she borrowed from me 2 years ago. Left the tea tin, still half full. Some things aren't worth carrying. Before I zipped the bag, I opened the drawer beside the bed, the only one I had, and slid out the envelope of cash I'd kept tucked inside an old pair of socks. Emergency money. Apparently, this counted. As I stepped into the hallway, the lights flickered. The house was warm, full of food, conversation, the clatter of forks. And yet I'd never felt more cold. Jamie stood by the bathroom door, earbuds out, holding a water bottle. We locked eyes. "I'm leaving," I said simply. He didn't blink. He didn't ask why. He just nodded, slow and quiet, like he'd known for weeks this moment was coming and had already rehearsed his silence. I walked past him. Marla was laughing at something Ivy said. Darren was half asleep in front of the TV. Piper had her feet up on the coffee table, wine glass refilled. No one turned to look. I opened the front door. The air outside was sharp with night and freedom. I stepped out. I didn't slam the door. Didn't look back. Didn't leave a note. And I didn't expect a single one of them to come after me. The place I found was behind a nail salon, tucked between a pawn shop and a crumbling auto repair garage with a flickering neon open sign that buzzed even when it wasn't. The front door stuck halfway when I first pushed it. The landlord, a man named Raoul who spoke with few words and never asked mine, handed me the key without ceremony and said, "Lock clicks left, not right." The studio was small. One window, half fogged with age. A ceiling fan that ticked like it had a secret. A bed frame made of metal that wobbled if you breathed wrong. A dresser that leaned like it was mourning something. And yet, it was mine. There were no footsteps stomping down the hallway. No wine glasses clinking, no whisper laughter behind bedroom doors. Just silence. A silence so unfamiliar it felt like noise. That first night, I unpacked slowly. 3 blouses. 2 pairs of pants. My pills. The framed photo of Jamie as a baby, I set it on the wobbly dresser, facing the wall. I wasn't ready to see his smile just yet. I slept in my clothes. Not because I was afraid. Because I didn't want to move. The mattress was thin, the blanket scratchy. But I slept. Not deeply. Not peacefully. But I slept. In the morning, I boiled water in a dented kettle and poured it over a bag of instant oatmeal. I sat on the edge of the bed with a plastic spoon and watched the light crawl across the floor. There were no voices. No one needed me to fold their towels. No one sighed when I turned on the kitchen light too early. It was jarring, at first. Loneliness didn't arrive like a wave. It seeped in quietly, like moisture through old brick. I found myself listening for doors that wouldn't open. For footsteps that never came. Sometimes I caught myself folding napkins, out of habit. Sometimes I imagined Marla's voice in the next room, calling me by name, not sharply, not cruelly, just calling. But it was just the air vent clicking. And still, I didn't leave. Instead, I bought a second-hand lamp from a thrift store down the block. A red one, chipped at the base, but warm when lit. I taped a note above the sink. Breathe. You're not there anymore. By the end of the week, I had a routine. Morning tea. Midday walks past the laundromat. Evening TV, always on low, just enough to drown out the buzz from the nail salon below. I didn't tell anyone where I went. No calls. No texts. No Facebook updates. No explanations. For the first time in decades, I didn't owe my presence to anyone else's comfort. And I didn't feel guilty for it. It started on a Sunday. The sky was gray, the kind that made everything feel soft and muted. I had just poured hot water over a bag of chamomile when the phone buzzed, once, then again. I didn't recognize the number. I let it ring. It stopped. Then another. Then another. All different area codes, but the same vibration, insistent, urgent. I turned the phone over and slid it under a folded dish towel. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Within the hour, the screen was glowing like a fire alarm. 11 missed calls. 2 voicemails. 3 text messages. I stood at the sink, hands damp, breathing slow. I wasn't ready. And yet, I pressed play. The first voicemail was from Darren. His voice, once solid and calm, cracked at the edges. Mom. It's about Dylan. He's missing. We thought maybe. I mean, we didn't know if you'd heard anything. Please, call me. The words didn't hit all at once. They landed in pieces. Dylan. Missing. I sat down on the edge of the mattress. My tea was still steaming, untouched. The second voicemail was Marla's. Shorter. Sharper. Eleanor. If he contacts you, tell us. This is serious. He left a note. We don't know where he went. Don't make this harder than it already is. Not are you okay? Not we're sorry. Just report to us. If he's with you. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Instead, I opened the drawer and took out the only photo I hadn't been able to throw away, Dylan at 9 years old, holding a model rocket we built together from a kit. He was always the quiet one. The watcher. The one who listened even when no one else did. And if he was gone, it wasn't random. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow erosion, like mine had been. I turned my phone off. Left it face down on the table. Sat still until the tea cooled completely. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound outside felt like it might be him. Footsteps. A bus door closing. A shout from down the block. I flinched each time. Because deep down, I already knew. They weren't calling me because they missed me. They were calling because something cracked, and the glue they used to keep him obedient wasn't holding anymore. The next morning, I turned my phone on. 21 missed calls. 4 voicemails. 7 texts. One stood out. From Ivy. It read only. He mentioned you. Right before he left. That was when the ache in my chest stopped feeling like sorrow. It felt like instinct. Not fear. Readiness. If he was out there, somewhere, hurting, alone, he wouldn't be calling them. He'd be trying to find the only person who had never asked him to disappear. Me. It was mid-afternoon. The kind of quiet where even the hum of the refrigerator felt loud. I was peeling a boiled egg over the sink, my mind drifting somewhere far from that tiny studio. Somewhere warm. Somewhere I had never quite been. Then my phone rang. Not buzzed. Not vibrated. It rang, the old-fashioned tone I hadn't heard in weeks. A single name blinked on the screen. Unknown number. I let it ring once. Twice. On the third, I answered. Hello? There was silence. Then a voice. Small. Raw. Familiar. Grandma? My knees gave out before I could move to the chair. I slid down to the floor, still clutching the phone like it was something sacred. Dylan, I breathed. Are you all right? He let out a shaky breath. I'm okay. I'm safe. I didn't know who else to call. My throat tightened. Where are you? At my friend Malik's. He let me stay a few nights. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want them to know. I pressed a hand to my chest, grounding myself. Are you hurt? No, he said quickly. Just tired. I left because I couldn't take it anymore. The yelling. The pretending. The way they all kept talking about you, like you were nothing. Like it was your fault. His voice cracked on the last word. I said nothing. I just listened. I tried to say something, he continued, barely above a whisper. To defend you. Ivy told me I was pathetic. Piper laughed. Dad told me to stop being dramatic. There was a long pause. And then Marla, he trailed off. She didn't even look up. Just said, maybe you should go live with your grandmother if you care about her so much. And then she tossed my stuff into the hallway. My eyes blurred. Not from grief. From rage. And something deeper. Recognition. Dylan, I said slowly, you didn't deserve that. None of it. I know, he said, almost like a confession. I know now. Another pause. Then, can I come to you? Those 5 words split the air like thunder. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I whispered. Right now. I'll come get you if I have to. I can send you the address, he said. It's not far. I didn't know if you'd want me there. Always, I said, steady now. Always, Dylan. There's nothing they could say to change that. He sniffed. Okay. We hung up after that. I watched the screen go dark and stayed on the floor for another minute, just breathing. Not shaking. Not afraid. Just full of something I hadn't felt in years. Needed. I grabbed my coat, my purse, and left the boiled egg on the counter, forgotten. Some meals can wait. Some people never should. I didn't rush. I couldn't. My legs moved with purpose, but my hands, those betrayed me. I held the bus pass like it might dissolve. Clutched my purse too tight. Forgot to zip my coat. The ride was short, but the seconds stretched. A couple argued 3 rows behind me. Someone coughed into their sleeve. The driver hummed along to an old pop song. And through it all, I sat still, like a woman holding her breath underwater. The address Dylan gave led to a narrow street lined with chain-link fences and tired porches. I spotted him before I even stepped off the bus. He was sitting on the front stoop of a faded green duplex. Hoodie up. Shoulders hunched. A duffel bag sat beside him, half-zipped and slumped like it had been packed in a hurry. When he saw me, he stood, too quickly, and wavered. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then I walked toward him. And he came to me. No words. Just arms around my waist, head buried in my shoulder like he used to when he was 8 and scraped his knees on the driveway. I held him tighter than I meant to. Not out of fear this time, but out of sheer relief. He didn't cry. Neither did I. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was something quieter. Something deeper. The kind of reunion that doesn't demand proof, only presence. After a while, I brushed his hair back and looked at him. You ready? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. Let's go. He didn't say goodbye to Malik. Didn't look back. Just slung the bag over his shoulder and followed me down the sidewalk, both of us silent as we boarded the return bus. We sat in the middle, side by side. Dylan kept his hood up, earbuds in, but he didn't play any music. I could tell. He stared out the window the entire ride. At one point, I reached over and rested my hand on his. He didn't flinch. He just flipped his palm over and laced his fingers through mine. We didn't speak until we reached my building. He climbed the stairs ahead of me, one slow step at a time, like he was afraid of what waited behind the door. I unlocked it and pushed it open. It wasn't much. A narrow studio, one window, a second-hand rug, a lamp that hummed when the light was on too long. The scent of chamomile still lingered faintly in the air. Dylan stepped inside and stood still. He looked around, eyes scanning the space like he was memorizing it. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "This already feels better." I exhaled for the first time in hours. "You're safe here," I said. "You can stay as long as you need." He dropped the duffel bag to the floor. Not like someone giving up. Like someone finally allowed to rest. Dylan didn't say much that first night. He didn't have to. He unpacked slowly, folding his clothes with more care than I expected from a 17-year-old. He placed his toothbrush beside mine like it had always belonged there. Then he sat on the edge of the futon and stared at the blank wall for a while, elbows on his knees, head bowed. I made tea. 2 mugs. Chamomile for me. Mint for him. I didn't ask if he liked it. I just poured it and set it beside him. He nodded once. Sipped. That was enough. That night, I left the lamp on in the corner. A soft gold glow across the room. Dylan curled up under a patchwork quilt I'd found at a thrift store months ago, the kind with threads pulled loose but warmth still intact. I stayed up reading. Not a novel. Not even the paper. Just the ingredients label on the cereal box. It was the first time the apartment didn't feel small. It felt full. By morning, he was still asleep. Curled on his side, one hand under the pillow, breathing steady. I stood over him for a moment, not to hover, not to check, just to witness something I hadn't seen in years. A child at peace. I made oatmeal. Stirred in cinnamon. Topped it with banana. Set the bowl down and let the steam drift toward him. He didn't wake until almost 10. When he did, he rubbed his face with both palms and looked around like he forgot where he was, then relaxed. No alarms. No banging doors. No voices raised just beyond the wall. Just the quiet hum of the fridge and the soft clink of my spoon against a teacup. "This smells good," he mumbled. I smiled. "It's just oats." He shrugged, grabbed the bowl, and ate every bite without a word. That alone told me everything I needed to know. For the next few days, we moved like shadows around each other, light, careful, tender. He took over the corner by the window, where the light came through in perfect lines mid-afternoon. Sat there with a sketchbook, sometimes drawing, sometimes just staring outside. I didn't pry. But I noticed the way his shoulders stopped tensing every time a car passed by. The way he stopped checking his phone altogether. Sometimes we watched old cooking shows on mute. Not because we cared about the recipes, but because the soft rhythm of the chef's voice, even silent, was better than the silence we'd known before. One night, I offered to let him watch something louder. He shook his head. "This is better," he said. Better. Not perfect. Not joyful. Just, better. That word stuck with me. He didn't talk about the others. Not Ivy, not Piper, not his father. And I didn't ask. What mattered was this. Every night, he slept. Every morning, he woke up. And each day, the quiet between us became less about avoidance and more about healing. It came on a Thursday. 3 quick knocks, sharp and steady, the kind that don't ask permission so much as expect a response. I was chopping carrots. The knife paused midair. Dylan looked up from the couch, alert but quiet. We both knew. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. Through the peephole, a trench coat too pristine for the season. Beige. cinched tight at the waist. A leather tote slung over her shoulder. Piper. Hair curled like she came from a salon, not from the guilt of an abandoned child. And beside her, Everett, my son, stood with both hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, chin tucked like he was 13 again and about to lie to me. I didn't open the door. Not at first. I let them stand there. One more knock. Then silence. When I finally unlatched the lock and cracked the door open, I stepped halfway into the frame, not out of warmth, but to block the view behind me. Everett's eyes flicked past me, scanning the room. Piper's gaze went cold the second she saw my face. "We just want to talk," she said, tone rehearsed. Polished like a voicemail you regret sending halfway through but finish anyway. "Not here," I replied. Everett shifted. "Mom. Please. This isn't about us. It's about Dylan." My hand tightened on the knob. "Then maybe," I said slowly, "you should have thought of that before you let your wife tell him he was a burden." Piper bristled. "He wasn't kicked out. He left." "He was thrown out," I said. My voice didn't rise. "Don't stand here and rewrite the script. You packed his things, tossed them into the hallway, and told him to grow up. That's not leaving. That's being discarded." She opened her mouth. I didn't let her speak. "And let's not pretend," I added, "that this visit is about love. This is about image. The school's asking questions, maybe the neighbors too." Everett's voice cracked. "We didn't come to fight." "No," I said, "you came to rescue your reputation. Not your son." Silence stretched like a tightrope. Finally, Piper took a step forward. "Is he here?" I didn't move. "If you're asking," I said, "it means he hasn't called you." Everett blinked. "We just want to make things right." I tilted my head. "Did you come with an apology? A plan? A place where he won't be mocked for caring about me?" They didn't answer. I took a breath and opened the door, just enough to speak clearly. "He's safe here. He sleeps through the night. He eats. He laughs sometimes. I'm not sending him back into a place that taught him love comes with conditions." "You don't have custody," Piper snapped. "No," I said, "but I have something else. I have his trust." "And you lost it the minute you chose silence over him." Her face twitched. "Just once." Everett's voice dropped. "We thought maybe he'd calm down and come home." "He did come home," I said. "It just wasn't yours anymore." I stepped back. "Whatever you came to say it to your reflection. Because I'm not the one who needs convincing." And then I shut the door. Not with a slam. Not with anger. But with finality. Dylan never asked who it was. He didn't need to. He simply looked at me when I returned to the kitchen, eyes steady. I nodded once. "They won't be back." He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just picked up a carrot slice from the counter, popped it into his mouth, and went back to his homework. I stood at the sink for a while after that, just rinsing the same spoon twice, maybe 3 times. The quiet had a weight to it, but not the kind that crushes. The kind that settles, finally, after too many years of noise. In the living room, Dylan leaned over his notebook, humming under his breath. A boy with too many shadows behind him, and finally, a small patch of sun to sit in. I didn't interrupt. I just dried my hands, looked around our small kitchen, and felt something click into place. There were no apologies coming. No sudden knock on the door that would undo what they'd done. But there was a boy doing his homework. And there was me, standing here, no longer asking for space, just taking it. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was better. It was home. Thanks for listening. If this story found a quiet corner in your heart, don't forget to subscribe, and if you feel ready, share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters. It always has.